We apologise for this delay in your scheduled programming, as Aaron's brain has literally melted due to the amount of references in the movie Ready Player One. We hope you can understand, and we are trying to resolve any technical difficulties we are now currently experiencing. We would like to extend the original apology we made, as we are still having technical difficulties and we can't seem to get Aaron working again. He's broken. I think he's dead. I don't think... I'm sorry if you were expecting a review of Ready Player One, but I'm afraid the movie killed him. That many references... I mean, that's more than any person should actually be able to handle. Whilst we wait for a replacement Aaron to be found, here's a picture of a cat. Everybody loves cats. Yeah, that should sort it. Ready Player One is directed by Steven Spielberg, is based off of the best-selling novel of the same name written by Ernest Cline, and stars Ty Sheridan, Olivia Cooke, Ben Mendelsohn, Simon Pegg, and TJ Miller. I want to make something very clear just before I get into this review. I've never actually read the book that this movie is based off of, and to be honest, hearing that apparently this movie takes quite a few deviations from its source material, I don't think it really matters if you've read the original book or not. I mean, I haven't read the book, and I had a ton of fun with this movie, and I enjoyed it just as a movie. One thing I will say though, if you've read the book or not, one thing you must know, or at least have a slight knowledge of, is video games, movies, and anything pop culture related from the last 20 or so years. You will need that kind of knowledge to go into this movie, because otherwise you'll kind of be lost with the amount of references there are in this movie, because there's a lot. So yeah, that's probably the biggest positive I can give this movie. It's just a ton of fun. The action scenes are incredibly well handled, and whenever the characters are inside the Oasis, which is the virtual reality world which is in this movie, it's really cool to look at. I mean, Spielberg knows how to helm the camera, and he does it really well in this movie. Whether it's dialogue scenes or just, really cool action scenes, he knows how to helm them really, really well. And this movie has some really cool moments. For example, two of my favourite scenes in the movie are probably the opening race, which kind of kicks off the whole thing. That is a really, really cool scene, and it's typical Spielberg fun. And there is also a scene, I won't give away too much, but it's a really, really big homage to The Shining. It kind of helps if you've seen The Shining before watching this movie though, because if you haven't, you'll be kind of lost with that scene. But those two scenes were easily my favourites in the entire movie. The race, because it's just really cool and filmed and done in the best possible way, and the Shining scene, just because it's so creative and unlike anything I'd really seen in a movie before. And that leads on to the other thing that made this movie so fun, was just the amount of Easter eggs and visual references to things pop culture related that are just a load of fun to actually just point out and try and figure out what they're actually from, because there were quite a few moments, especially during the final battle scene, where I just had a huge smile on my face because I noticed so many different video game and movie characters all coming together in one big scene. And it's honestly, if you like that kind of stuff, if you're a nerd as per se like me, you will eat that shit up. It's so satisfying to see, because you'll just be there looking at the screen going, okay, I see a Master Chief, I see a Sonic, I see some Overwatch characters, I think that's Godzilla, yeah, okay, yeah, there's the DeLorean, yeah, you'll be there for ages just picking apart everything. And that is one thing I have to say about this movie. You will need to watch it quite a few times to really pick out every single reference in this movie. If you're someone like myself that really wants to try and, you know, pick out everything that's in this movie, you're going to need to watch it a few times, which is why I'm definitely buying this movie on Blu-ray when it comes out, so I can actually find and look for every reference that I missed the first time I saw it in the cinema. The performances were all really good in this movie as well. I thought Ty Sheridan was absolutely fine as the main character, Wade Watts. I thought he was pretty good for what he had to do. They could have got someone a little bit better, but I thought by the end of the movie, I thought he was good enough for the main role. Two of my favourites, though, have to be Olivia Cooke as one of Wade Watts' friends, Artemis. I thought she was really good, especially seeing that the only thing I've actually seen her in is Me and Earl and the Dying Girl, and I really liked her in that. So to see her in something else that's a bigger project, I really liked. And also Ben Mendelsohn as the main bad guy of the movie. Yeah, he might be a bit generic and a little bit cliched, but he literally relishes every moment he's in that role. And one nice detail that I noticed about his character is that he's given these kind of really enlarged, full, like, fake teeth that give him, like, the cheesiest businessman smile you will ever see. And that really works for his character, seeing that he's kind of this corporate businessman kind of, character. And I really like that about his character. It did sound like he had false teeth in sometimes, but it really works because it makes him look a bit more, slimy and a bit more untrustworthy than he already actually is. I also really liked Mark Rylance as Halliday, the guy who created the Oasis. There are a few times where you look at his character and it's like, is that? Yeah, that's Mark Rylance, because they do such a good job of making him look nerdier and him younger than he actually is. And he really does work for that role, because like when you think Mark Rylance playing like a computer geek, it doesn't quite work, seeing that how old he is and the fact that most of the stuff he's played have been really sophisticated British roles, or roles that are not like that. But then he actually plays the guy who's in charge of the Oasis, and it works. Somehow it works. And by the end of the movie, I couldn't really see anyone else playing him, and that was really something, especially considering how I went into the movie not quite knowing how it would work with such an old person and such a, I suppose, typecast person playing a role like that. But I think in the end it really did work. Also, Alan Silvestri's score was really good for this movie. It also managed to weave in a few little Easter eggs and nods of its own, with hints to previous scores that he's done, such as Back to the Future. There were a couple of moments where he'd weave in certain tunes and things from the Back to the Future score, and I'd be like, that's pretty cool. The movie isn't perfect, though. The plot is very basic, I suppose. But the best thing about it is that it gets from point A to B of that story in some really unique and creative ways, which is what kept me engaged. Yeah, the plot is pretty straightforward, but the way they get there is pretty cool, to say the least. So that kind of wasn't a big deal for me, but as the movie went along, I was just like, yeah, this is going to happen, then this is going to happen. So yeah, that was kind of a bit noticeable, but there were so many cool things that they did to get through that plot that kind of made it not that big of a deal for me. Also, the movie kind of struggles with trying to fill its length. It's 2 hours and 20 minutes, roughly, and there are a few times where it feels like there's a few things missing, but there's also a few times where it feels like it's trying to rush a few things. For example, the final act, which is pretty much this great big battle scene that also has integrated a few scenes in the real world in it, it does feel like it's kind of outstaying its welcome, whereas the rest of the movie, like the first 2 acts, were really well paced, really evenly spread out, and I thought they were just really good. And even though the third and final act is really enjoyable and has probably some of the best references in the entire movie, especially one line in particular that pretty much had everyone, including myself, laughing in the cinema. You'll know it when you see it. Even though it is really enjoyable to watch, it does feel like they're trying to stretch it out for as long as possible. But then you have other things like the fact that the relationship between Olivia Cooke's character and Ty Sheridan's, even though I do think it works, it does feel a little rushed in places. So it kind of feels a bit odd in that sense. You have a third and final act that does feel a bit bloated, but is good. But then you have other elements that do feel a bit rushed, which kind of makes you feel like they had trouble trying to fit it within a 2-hour time frame. I'm having trouble trying to explain it, but if you get what I mean, you get what I mean. The other gripe that I had with this movie, and I suppose it's not really a gripe, which I'll explain in a second, is the fact that anything they do in the Oasis is immediately way more interesting than anything they do in the real world. And the more I think about it, yeah, I suppose that's actually the point of the movie. And I can see why some people would gripe about that, but when you really think about it, the real world is supposed to look really boring and shitty, because when they escape into the Oasis, it's everything you want times 10. So if the real world was just as interesting as the Oasis, it wouldn't, it wouldn't add up that equally, would it? So I can understand why the real world isn't as interesting as the Oasis. But that being said, and this is where my gripe kind of comes into it, whenever they're in the real world, my brain was just thinking, I just want to go back to the Oasis because, that was a bit more interesting. Despite those minor nitpicks, I still had a ton of fun with this movie, and that's pretty much what I went into this movie kind of expecting. I went in only wanting it to be entertaining and enjoyable, and that's what I got. A fun experience, nothing more, nothing less, which is why I'm going to give Ready Player One an 8 out of 10. Yes, it does have some problems, but in the end I don't think they're enough to really, bog down the movie. I can understand why some people would go into this movie and would see the shit ton of references and Easter eggs as a hindrance to the movie, but I personally thought that you have the plot and the characters going their own way and doing their own thing, and the references are just a nice icing on top of the cake. It's a bloody thick icing, but still, it's just there to enhance the experience, rather than keep making you get distracted every so often, like going, oh look, there's the guy from Mortal Kombat, or oh look, there's Predator. Yeah, that is a nice thing to do in the movie, and is better to do once you've seen the movie once or twice, a few times more, but, it's just a nice thing to add on top of what was an already fun experience. So guys, that was my review of Ready Player One. I hope you enjoyed it. If you liked the video, then give it a thumbs up, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Bye!